All right. Hello and welcome everyone to another amazing live image critique in my Facebook group, the Portrait Photographers Resource. Now, this year we always have some absolutely phenomenal guests, but this year especially, we've had some really seasoned, incredible educators, and today is absolutely no exception. We have a very seasoned photography educator, ambassador for Nikon, Icon Awards double grandmaster, and in my opinion, one of the best portrait photographers in the world. I want to introduce you all to the amazing Jerry Ghionis. Jerry, how are you doing, buddy?
Good, man. Thank you so much. And you pronounced my name correctly, so that's always a good beginning.
Really? How do most people say it? Like Ghionis or something?
Yeah, Ghionis. Yeah, man, it's been funny. I think the funniest crucifixion of my name, I was in Mexico, and I swear I was introduced as, they like to say Yeti rather than Jerry, but he said it so quickly, it sounded like Harry, and then he said Ghionis. So Harry,
Some Harry Ghionis.
so Harry. Well, I'm embellishing a little bit. In my brain, it just sounded like Harry Balls, but anyway, there's the.
Well, hey, I speaking from experience, Jerry, there is absolutely nothing with having some hairy balls, okay? Well, hey, dude.
There you go.
Yeah, well, hey, I haven't seen you since WPPI this past year, so how have you been? How have you and Melissa been? How's the business? How's the dogs? How's life?
Life is good, mate. Look, I'm married to an incredible woman. She's. I wake up to the biggest smile, and I've got two puppies that love me to death. I jump in the pool twice a day. I'm doing what I love. I'm living the dream, mate. So I can't complain at all.
Yeah, definitely not. So before we jump into the image critiques, there's not many people who, at least in my group, who don't know who you are. But for those maybe who are a little bit unfamiliar with you, can you give us kind of like a 2 to 3 minute backstory on who you are, what your story is about, maybe some of your inspirations, anything you want to share with us, just to kind of paint a little bit of a picture of who Jerry Ghionis is.
Thank you, mate. Yeah. So look, born and raised in Melbourne, Australia. I consider myself Greek, but when I'm outside of Australia, I say I'm Australian, and I'm also an American now. So how many of those do you know? Australian, American, Greeks. But I knew I wanted to be a photographer at the age of 15. I shot my first professional gig at 20. So I've been photographing my whole adult life. So I'm basically on my 31st year in the business, and I've been teaching since 2000. So that's been a big passion of mine. I've photographed pretty much all over, taught all over, and I lived in LA for about 7 years. Lived in Vegas now for about 7 years as well. Most of my family's in Australia. My rest of my extended family's in Greece. But, I started off shooting weddings, and I think weddings is really the best genre of photography to learn photography from, because in a wedding you shoot everything. You're shooting a wedding, of course. You're shooting people. You're shooting streetscapes, landscapes, detail, fashion, headshots, under pressure, time constraints, weather constraints, you name it, you photograph it. So that has allowed me to expand my palette. I prefer to photograph people. So here in Vegas, I photograph a lot of performers. I do a lot of commercial work, still do a lot of fashion. I still shoot weddings. So really, I'm enjoying all the genres at the moment, to be honest. And there's times where I do a lot more of one than the other. But I think... my superpower, I think, is my empathy. I think that's my strong suit. I just, like I said, man, I right now I prioritize joy in everything that I do. So if I enjoy it and there's joy to be had, I'll do it. I've got no time for crap or negativity or anything from anyone, and I just enjoy the ride, and I'm enjoying the industry at the moment. So yeah, life is good, man.
That's amazing. And I would love for you to kind of briefly touch up with us on your involvement with WPPI and the Icon Awards, because I mean, it's, in my opinion, it's one of the most exciting parts about our industry is seeing what other people are creating and just, looking at these incredible images and saying to yourself, wow, how was that done? And, I can speak for myself and many others, people look at your work and as well and really get inspired by you. So I'm sure there's some sort of connection with you educating and now you basically running the Icon Award. So can you kind of give us a little bit of insight on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I found out about WPPI, which I understood very long time ago, like in 2000, 2001, that it was the biggest collection, I guess, of international wedding and portrait photographers in the world. So it garners the most international audience. And, in Australia, we have what, 27 odd million people, and you have that in California. So I never really realized the abundance of America, and still I often freak out of the abundance, So, I entered this competition, WPPI. I didn't really know too much about it, and I did really well. The year after, I ended up coming to the US, and I've been over 20 years in a row now. I didn't know whether I'd have anyone attend my platform. There was over 1,000 people in the room. And then it exposed me to a whole new world. And then I started getting gigs and jobs and photographing and teaching all over. And, competition really drove me. And it wasn't really a trophy hunt. It was just a symbol of your commitment that I really enjoyed. And, I kept on entering year after year and I did really well. But I realized that the process was what I was always and still am very attracted to. I am not someone that hedges their bets or joy on just a positive outcome. I believe in what Bon Jovi said, because every poet needs the pain. I like the painful process of creating, so to speak, and that's just in life. I love the process. I'm very much, when I eat food, I eat it slowly. When I do something, I do it slowly. I take my time. I inhale life. And so what's happened is that WPPI for me was that benchmark. Every single year I would go out of my way to create something new, something different. What hasn't been done before? What hasn't been repopularized? So I went, and so I created some really hallmark creations over the years. And for me, without it, it's like Djokovic without having Grand Slam events. And I'm not, by no means am I likening myself to him, but what I'm getting at is, it's the thrill of the chase. It's the thrill of being able to place yourself on a platform, understand that it's you against you at this point. And then if you end up doing well, fantastic. But ultimately, for me, it was that. And then later on, one more trophy is not going to do any difference to me. And for me, Melissa and I really love being cheerleaders for everybody else. So in a nutshell, for those who don't know what I'm talking about, WPPI needed some help to reinvent the rules, reinvent the accreditation process, the categories, and all these different things. And we knew it needed help. And think of it like a baby that is a collective, that is everyone's grown up with it, and it needed more nurturing. So Melissa and I volunteered our time. We reinvented everything. We spent a decade with WPPI and running the competition, even to the point where the prints from all over the world came to our physical home. Imagine opening up hundreds of boxes, barcoding them, placing them in order, shipping them, organizing 60 judges, print handlers, hangers. We did everything. Yeah. And then it just got, literally. And we got to the point where, we knew that the writing was on the wall, that arguably that the feasibility of the competition would just, it just wouldn't grow. And arguably it would just stop, because financially, to have 8 rooms over 2 days of judging and judges, WPPI would lose a couple hundred grand a year. And even though that it's the soul of the convention and, and the trade show and everything like that, it's very hard to justify. So, I'm pragmatically, even though that, it's very easy for us to say, no, but hey, if you're going to pay for it, no one's going to do it. So then when WPPI cancelled it, everyone literally just stopped and looked at Melissa and I and said, what are you guys going to do about it? I said, well, just give me some time. And I need to work out how to do this feasibly, how to have longevity, and really create a community-driven educational experience that will outlive us all. And that's what we did. We spent a long time doing it, and we're really proud of the differences that we've done and created. And it's been amazing. Now we're in our second year. We're open for entries literally as we speak, and it's been really rewarding. So, and yeah, it's been fantastic. So, and people say, why do I care so much? Well, when you grow up a certain way and you know that it's affected you positively, how could I, if I have the power to do something, why wouldn't I? Now, would I make more money doing more photography and more time for myself? Well, yes, but there comes a point in your career where you want to give back. You understand legacy, and this is about the community's legacy, not my own. Like I said, we're here to support the industry, and like I said, someone's going to do it. So, it's us.
Right on, Jerry. No, and what you and Melissa have done for the community has been absolutely phenomenal, and I can definitely say that the impact that WPPI has had on my professional career is extremely profound. I mean, I can't think of any single other event in my life where I wasn't as inspired as I was leaving my first WPPI back in 2012. And as I mentioned earlier before we hopped on this call, that was the first time that, I heard you speak, and, it's been so incredibly just amazing and inspirational what you guys have done. So thank you on behalf of myself and everyone in the Portrait Photographers Resource. So super cool that you are here, giving your expertise and your insight on some of these photos that people have submitted today. So I am really excited to jump into it. And before we jump into it, I wanted to thank you and Melissa for sponsoring this month's critique. We're going to be giving away an Omega reflector, which is actually a reflector that you, from my understanding, you developed and produce. And I'm going to give you a little bit of time to talk a little bit more about that. Halfway through the video, we'll take a quick break, and I want you to kind of just tell everyone what that is about, because right now I really want to jump into these image critiques. I'm super eager to get into them. Are you ready? Sweet,
I'm ready,
man.
mate.
All right. So as always, for those of you who are new, I am going to be monitoring the comments on my screen on my right. So if you have any questions or you have any comments, please feel free to type something. And if we have a moment, we'll address it in the video. But other than that, we're going to go ahead and jump right in. So let's go ahead and switch my screen. Wrong screen. Hold on a second. Let's change that. There we go. Okay, so this first image comes from Critter, and he didn't share any information other than he shot this with natural light. So you know what, Jerry? I'm going to let you do the honors. I'm going to let you kind of dive into this and let everyone know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, look, it has impact straight away. Obviously, the structure and the embellishment, the columns, everything is just beautiful. That palette is stunning. And obviously we have this ballerina in the middle, which I really enjoy. Our eyes read from top left to bottom right. And there's argument to say that the legs are in that particular flow. And there's also argument to sort of say, if we flipped it, would that be better? And I don't think so, because like I said, you have two things to sort of look at. Well, yeah, it's tough. I've just flipped it on my computer, and I feel that as soon as you sort of go down, your eye hits her face, it goes down to her legs, and it sort of goes back up. It actually looks really, really beautiful when you flip it horizontally. But taking that away, I photograph a lot of performers now myself, so I really enjoy this particular process. Now, you've got repeating patterns, repeating lines, so the repeating columns. And what's more interesting than a pattern? It's a pattern interrupted. So she's interrupting the symmetrical nature and the predictability of this shot. And when I say predictability, I'm talking about the architecture, not what the photographer did here. As far as what she's doing, I really enjoy her legs. I find that her hands, her left hand is great. And it works well. And the right hand, and I guess what's happening is you've got beautiful flow and beautiful curves on the legs, and then the arms are really boxy. And what happens is you're sort of ruining the nature of the curve of her feet, of her back. And then what happens is if we square the pose up, whether it's a ballerina, whether it's a bride, whether it's a feminine pose, per se, that just remember, if you square things up, it can be problematic, and just sometimes just breaking the symmetry of the arms, the elbows, the hands can soften that a little bit. So, for example, her left hand and forearm is parallel to the ground, and it's parallel to the repeating lines of the window frame. So sometimes when you sort of break that energy from those repeating lines, you can get away with that boxy kind of a pose. If I'm zooming up to it just myself here, she's a little bit tentative in the mouth. You can just sort of see that she's got a hint of a smile going on, and then she's got that little ripple on her chin, sort of like that bit of tentative nature. And I often find that when you are photographing someone, in this case a ballerina, just sort of say something like, just breathe through your mouth. And in other words, part your lips to a point where air comes out of them, and it makes people relax their chin. It makes the lips look fuller without pouting, and it actually works well. So also what I would suggest you do is put this in like Photoshop, select all, Command T, whatever, go edit, transform, and then skew those columns so that we get a symmetrical, like we've got those leading lines of those columns. You sort of see how you see less of the columns on the bottom of the frame and you see more columns on the top. Not really a big deal because we've evened them up, but I would say sometimes you just get rid of the anomaly and straighten it up. One might argue, well, then we don't see the complete frame on the top. I think you have enough frame to play with, but not a really big deal. But I love kind of doing this kind of stuff myself, is actually photographing against daylight, having that little bit of an edge light that's sort of built into the to that particular shot. So yeah, there's a lot more, but I don't want to steal too much thunder from you as well.
Oh, no worries at all, Jerry. So just for some clarification, going back to the pose, are you essentially recommending that she opens up her arms a little bit more?
Well, just breaking the squareness of it. Does that make sense? Like,
it does.
So
absolutely.
see how her wrist is bent up, but then it's continuing the line of the arm. So even if she flopped her hand down, for example, that would break the monotony of that line being parallel to the ground and being very square. The way she's arching her back is beautiful, but then she's moving her hand. So her hand feels a bit forced. You see how the legs, well, it's a forced pose because she's a dancer and she's doing something quite extraordinary. It feels just the hands are not mirroring the flow of her legs. So if she had her hand up or she loosened them up, but just break the monotony of that squareness, because we're ruining the nature of all the curves that are interrupting those very strong lines per se.
Absolutely.
When you look at it closely too, so at first glance, it looks quite symmetrical. If you look at the bottom of that chandelier, so look at that little ball area.
Yep.
If you look to the left of it and to the right of it, you've got a little bit more negative space to the right and the left. It is so minute, but if a judge was looking at this, for example, if you were putting this in competition, if impact is there, which it is, and then you keep on searching for different things in good ways, sometimes, you'll question, if you were going symmetrical, then that little detail, it's thoughtful. It's actually done with intent. And that's an important thing to recognize.
Absolutely. And, one thing that I just want to point out, because I don't want to drag this photo on too long, or one thing to add to all of that, Jerry, everything that you said is absolutely incredible feedback. The only thing I would like to add is, when you're photographs like this are very tough, because when you're shooting against a very strong highlight, what's going to happen when you're looking at the image? I say this all the time in my image critiques. Your eye is naturally going to go to the brightest part of the scene, right? And in this case, your eyes, at least my eyes, go straight to those really really bright blown out highlights. So obviously in a situation like this, you're kind of balancing, and you kind of have this internal struggle where, well, if I try to get detail out of that background, is it going to make the image busier, or do I run the risk of having those really strong highlights and really distracting us from the subject? So probably what I would personally do in this photo critter to really help and just bring more attention to your subject is to try to bring up the shadows just a little bit on the dancer here, because I do feel like she is getting just a little bit lost behind those bright highlights. I don't know if you agree or not with that, Jerry, but that's just kind of what what I see. I'm just seeing a little bit loss of detail in those shadows in her face.
Yeah, I mean, look, let's address like the highlights. Like just remember, I think that many of us get caught up with we need to have detail in the blacks and detail in the whites, or the highlights and the shadows. It depends on what you're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like there's detail in every Rembrandt painting
Right.
in the blacks. So if this was an overcast sky, which it probably was, I mean, if we saw like a dark, dramatic, the cartoon Simpsons clouds, we would say, well, that's a bit distracting. So I think that the lack of detail here, I actually think is actually quite good. And here's the thing that can be done as well. If you're looking at this, what's bringing context into this image is that you've got this ornate columns and chandeliers, and then you've sort of got somewhat of a modern kind of a frame of the window. This is where you can take creative liberties and just remove the black. If you remove the black, now you're taking away context, therefore improving mystery.
Interesting.
And with this, does that make sense? So this would be a completely different photograph if you just took that black frame away, because now you're photographing in Rome. You don't really know where you are, and that you're removing all modern perspective. Just remember too, whenever you're far away from a subject, you have to get the emotion from a pose or the gesture that you're not getting close up in the face.
Right.
So that's where, like, the legs are doing that. If the arms were separated, and because you're doing, it's not really a silhouette, but you're providing shape and form, bring the arms up, separate them a little bit, and I think you'll find that it'll just open up your world a little bit too. And remember too, whenever you're photographing a dancer, you must say something like this: is there anything that you can do that I wouldn't know about unless I asked you this question? And I'd say that to every person, even non-dancers, because sometimes, oh yeah, by the way, I can do this. Or I had an engagement couple session, and they said, yeah, we can, we're gymnasts. And I said, can you do a handstand and kiss at the same time? I said, sure. So, and I wouldn't have done it unless I asked that question,
Well, right on, Jerry. As much as I'd love to keep talking about this image, we do have 19 more to get through, so we'll jump we'll jump through. But hey, Critter, thank you so much for submitting this photo. It was definitely an amazing conversation piece for us to have. So really appreciate your continued support. So we're gonna go ahead and move on. This next one is actually from an anonymous photographer, so we can't put a name to the image, but this is it, and this was shot with a 24-105 f4 during a private shoot. So, I'll jump into this, and definitely when it comes to the posing, I think you're going to have a lot more insight than I will, Jerry. So I'm just going to touch up on some of the things that I'm kind of noticing off the bat that maybe are a little bit distracting to me. So, and again, I'm getting very technical or very nitpicky because this is a nice image, and I can certainly appreciate the soft transitions between the highlights and the shadows. So I'm gonna, judge this, so to speak, or critique this from a little bit of a higher a higher point of view. So the first thing that kind of distracts me a little bit are these, looks like they're like these blue and white ceramic tiles directly behind the subject. It's especially noticeable over her right shoulder. It I don't know why, but for me, my eye kind of immediately goes there because I'm asking myself, what is that? What is that little piece that is sticking out directly from the image? And then on the other side as well, that it just feels a little out of place. And obviously, you can't control every environment that you're photographing, but you can, some things you can control are your angles, the perspectives that you choose, and of course, some things that you can't control in post-production. But other than that, I mean, I and I'll let you jump into this a little bit more, Jerry, if you agree with me or not. I find her left shoulder and her left arm to be a little bit stiff. Like she's almost trying to balance herself a little bit too much on this tub, which to me makes the pose feel a little uncomfortable. And quite frankly, I don't really understand her right hand and what she's trying to do with it. But that's really where I would love for you to jump in, Jerry, and maybe give a little bit more insight on something that she could have done a little bit different, or something that she could have done basically just to make the pose feel a little bit more natural. So what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. It's obviously a fashionable image. This is probably more about fashion than who this person is. So I often divorce myself. Like, is it a portrait? Are we trying to say something about who they are, or is it about the clothes and the styling and all that kind of stuff? In terms of the pose, obviously you're right. What's happening is that she's supporting her body weight with her left arm, and naturally your shoulder will just tweak forward. So. Right. I often will go up to people who are doing something like that and go up to them with my shoulder up and say, can you relax it? It might be circumstantial. It may be that, you know what, this is just not the right thing to do. If she leant on the front of the tub, it might fall. And or if she leant back, that wouldn't be flattering either. So the left hand, and also we call that foreshortening. When you turn it, like if I point my finger to the camera, my arm and my hand are going to be literally in a circle, but it's actually this long. So when you basically position a body part away from the camera to a point where it's straightening, if you look at the proportion of her right hand or left hand, it's completely different. And a lot of people sort of say, look, why do we have to look at images this closely, and does it really matter, and do clients really even care? And this is a global comment about critiques that we're even looking at even now. Just remember that critiquing is like watching a movie about spiders and then walking away itchy, and the next time you photograph you're going to be hypersensitive, and then you might lose the soul of the image. So my suggestion is, like, as much as we're focusing on critiques, we're watching the movie about spiders. Just remember there's a lot more joy to be had, and there's also some purity that comes with a raw approach, and not to be too perfect. Looking at this though, her right hand gesture I quite like. It's quite tight, and any time when you do a pose that's tight and your body is like this, and it doesn't matter girl or guy, we often think of this as feminine, where the pose is really tight to the face or whatever. When we want to look masculine, doesn't matter, born male, born female, you occupy more space, we consider that quite masculine. So it depends on what you're trying to say. So posing is not just for flattery, it's also for purpose. The only thing that I love curves. I want to celebrate them. So her hand and elbow being where it is, it's covering up the thinnest part of her waist.
Exactly.
And I often say it's a waste of a waist. Now, looking at the lighting though, it's split lighting, and traditionally it's light coming from one side, not the other. You would say that's usually better on the male face, or depending on what you're trying to say, because she's got, I call masculine, and again, it's depending on how people identify, right? If we're talking about masculine light, as in hard light, I often will say, I often refer to that as being sour. Think of like masculine as sour, feminine as sweet. Because we have such a sweetness to her face and her features, she's got that sour light, it counteracts the sour, so it's fine. Depending on features, if you have sour light and not so elegant features, sweetness, and I say this very delicately and sensitively, some people may not get away with it. So you've just got to work that out.
Absolutely. Yeah, and for me, and to address your comment on the split lighting, I mean, for me, I feel like it works very well here, only because there is still a lot of detail on the right side of her face, and you can still see, her features pretty definitively. But to you, anonymous photographer, if that is something that did bother you a little bit, maybe you didn't like that split lighting, simple adjustment, just maybe bringing her chin a little bit more towards the light, or bringing her nose towards the light, helping create more of that almost like that Rembrandt style lighting there. But I honestly don't have anything else to add.
Yeah, the split works. My suggestion is turn the face away from the light. Start there. and then slowly turn the face towards the light. And then
Hmm.
that way you get to understand, does this person suit broad lighting, split lighting, and then short lighting? And for those who don't know what I'm talking about, it's simply, are you photographing more on the bright side of the face? Are you doing one or the other, or are you creating a shadow by the nature? And that's it. But like I said,
Yeah.
it's fashionable image, and to be honest, if they cropped it closer, it would have a lot more strength, because the beauty really is in the face. There's no doubt about it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, great. Hey, an anonymous photographer, real quick. One other thing I just noticed that I would love to see happen. Probably bring down the highlights a little bit on the pink part of a dress on her left side. That's probably the only other thing as far as post processing I would recommend. Just bring down that highlight. It is quite strong. So we'll go ahead and move on. Thank you, anonymous photographer. This next one is not from an anonymous photographer, and this comes from Mark James. This was 600-watt strobe with a telezoom reflector. It's not an Omega reflector, but well, it's okay. And then used with Sony A7. So A7R M3. I don't know what that means. I'm a Nikon guy, but anyway, I'll let you jump into this first here, Jerry.
Yeah, beautiful curves. I love the fact that we've sort of got this sort of harsh background and arguably a high degree of difficulty, because we don't really know whether the escalator was actually moving or not. But regardless, I think that we've got beautiful contrast of that skin tone against a background that's interesting, but that contrast of that beauty and that grunge, I always enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
The pose is really nice. I love the curves that we're creating. So, whenever you're photographing a woman front on, I traditionally will always put her weight on one leg or the other, to be honest. Whether she's front on or on the side, I just think it's prettier. We get beautiful curves, and that's usually what we want to celebrate about the female form. So that's gorgeous. The right hand is good. I would love to have seen a bend in the elbow of that right hand, or camera left.
Mm-hmm.
And the one sort of framing her face is quite nice. Perhaps if we just brought her palm sort of in a little bit, because it's almost got that, I've got a headache kind of a vibe. But if she brings her sort of wrist in a little bit, it's framing her face a little bit more delicately. So slight little bend of the elbow, a little push in of the palm there in, and that's it. But it's for what it is. It's actually really nice, beautiful image.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my favorite part of the image, honestly, is the processing. You know what it reminds me of, the processing, is of the original Matrix. Do you ever see that movie? How it's got kind of that greenish, just color palette, and I love that here.
Amber and teal. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let me ask you a question, Jerry. How do you feel about the positioning of her legs? For me, and this is just my opinion, I almost feel like her legs are a little, almost just slightly too close to each other. So we kind of have this like pogo stick effect. And I'm thinking maybe if there was some more detail in the bottom of her legs, it wouldn't be as like an issue for me. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that aspect of the image. Do you think she should open her legs up? Do you think it's fine as it is? Does that bother you at all? Like it kind of bothers me.
No, I'll be honest with you. I don't really care. I
Okay.
obviously for me, it's a fashionable image, right? So we're not, the fact that, how do I say, it's sort of editorial. We're not really making any excuses. No one just is styled like that, walks down an escalator, and a photographer happens to be there and capture. So we have a bit of creative liberty that of what we're doing. The fact that she's sort of bending her knee over and she's lifting it. And here's the funny thing. I think that if we feather the light down a little bit and then those legs were brighter, I think some photographers or critiquers are going to say, well, we're too bright. So for me, it almost acts like a vignette. So you're just keeping your focus on her face. And for me, again, what I love about women is curves. So for me, it's gorgeous curves. And the more peaks and valleys we see, then the more we celebrate those curves. So we've got her hips, then it goes tight into her knees and it sort of fans out. If she went directly on top, then yes, you've got that pogo stick effect. But because it fans out a little bit towards her feet. Again, for me, it's peaks and valleys.
Perfect.
And yeah, and that's why that right arm, for example, see, you could see 10 curves, which let's say there's 10 curves there. When you've got one thing straight, you'll always look at the anomaly. You won't look at the repetition. You'll look at what's different about it. It's no different than seeing a white painting and a black dot. You look at the black dot. You're not going to look at the white.
Right on. Fair enough. Oh, and by the way, Mark James just commented. He said that the escalator was moving. So that's pretty awesome that you were able to capture it.
Yeah. Even a high degree of difficulty, that kind of thing, you would have to sort of rehearse it, so that when they're coming down, that this is what you need to do and all that kind of stuff. So the fact that it's actually that sharp, her body and face is contained. It's not too perfectly centered. It's very nice. It's a great job.
Definitely. Well, hey, thank you so much, Mark. Really, what a phenomenal image. And I just want to comment that I love the processing that you did on this. So really solid job. This next photo comes from another regular submission person, and this is from John Hawking. And real quick, before we dive into this, and actually I want to see, I have it somewhere here. Here it is. John, actually, he's a fellow Lara Photography Workshop alumni. He actually just recently wrote a book. It's called Exposed, and it's a thriller. It's a kind of a photography thriller novel. And I would encourage you guys all to pick this up. This is actually on Amazon, and we'll make sure I share a link in the group. But just wanted to give him a quick shout out because it's really cool that he actually wrote and published a book. So just wanted to give him a quick shout out. But going back to this image though, John. This is just, I look at this image and I smile. This is just funny. It really kind of warms my heart a little bit. And this is obviously a photo that this child's parents are gonna treasure and they're gonna love for forever. So with that said, there are a couple of small things I would probably change here, and that's gonna be really honestly just the color processing here. I find the image, at least on my monitor, I find it a little bit too magenta. I don't know if you're seeing the same thing, Jerry, but I do find it just a little too red, little kind of more towards that side of the color palette. So I would just tone that down a little bit, introduce a little bit more greens, help balance that color. Other than that, couple other small things. When it comes to photographing very young babies, especially, you need to be very careful on or you want to try to stay away. And this is just more of a personal preference. You can take this with a grain of salt, but you want to try to stay away from hard light, right? So when it comes to photographing children, I find that the softer the light, the better. So if you're using strobes, really use a huge softbox to help soften that light. For me, I can tell the light's a little bit harsh because if you look at this child's kind of right shoulder, you'll see that line right there. That's something that's actually easily fixed in post-production, but that's just something that's giving me an indication that the light is pretty hard. And then just another really, really tiny detail. One thing that's bothering me is I'm assuming it's a she. I don't want to, misspeak, but the little riffles on her shirt are kind of just barely covering her chin. So probably what I would have done in the situation is maybe just shoot from a slightly higher perspective, or just pulled that shirt down so I could see more more of the full face from this little one. But what a cute image, and the composition and the blurred out background is really nice to see. But Jerry, what do you have to add to this? I'm not a newborn photographer. I don't think you are either, but I'd like to see what you have to add.
Yeah, no, I photographed a lot of newborns back in the day.
Okay.
But I have the utmost respect for people who photograph newborns. In this case, probably 1 year old or something like that, give or take. I'm not too sure, but I have the patience to photograph 50 families, but a baby, hell no these days. Unless an adult is holding it and I'm doing it in a really cool way.
There you go.
I agree with what you've said here. For me, first of all, the negative space is really good. I find that sometimes with babies or children, we tend to photographed very perfectly centered and symmetrical, and it's a bit too obvious. So having a little bit of negative space, sort of leading your eye in there with a point of interest, I think is really good. The first thing I notice here that I would love to improve is what you mentioned, is that hard light. It feels to me to be too hard, and as in too bright and too front on. Mm-hmm. So because we have the negative space, as in we're looking at it camera left, it'd be nice to have the light coming from the top left to the right. So you're leading the light in, and then you're sort of creating a bit of a shadow. And it doesn't have to be dramatic. It's just watch that light coming from the front. Let's bring that light a little bit from our left and then going towards the baby. And then just little details. So obviously, we're, the whatever that is, the rabbit, the box, whatever the baby is in, flatten out the rabbit a little bit so that we can see the eyes of the rabbit. Like, just, think of it like that. We're only seeing one eye. So I tend to, whenever I'm about to photograph and I'm just about to click the camera, I'll literally scan the whole photograph and say, is there anything distracting? Can I do anything that can make this stronger or more powerful? At the end of the day, it's a photograph of a baby. And, I know we've all gone to a restaurant or met someone, and you have a new parent, and they can show you a crappy photo of their baby, and they're going to be in love with it because it's their baby. This is a great photograph of a baby. And now once we're looking at it from a photography perspective, we just want more marks, as in, how could we have done it more effectively? So yeah, softer light, tweak the color balance, which is tough because you're surrounded by green. And then you've got that sort of that pinky skin tone. It's a hard thing to correct, but yeah, good for what it is. Just watch that direction of light and and soften a little bit too. Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you again, John. And again, everyone, make sure you pick up his book, Exposed. It's a really exciting thriller novel. And I want to, before we move on to the next photo, I do want to apologize to Melissa. Yeah, dinner is going to be a little late tonight since we are spending so much time critiquing these amazing images. So, all right, go ahead and move on. This next photo comes from Redon Burton. This was shot using natural light, using a Canon. That's okay. I'm just kidding. And a 24-70 lens and a lot of adrenaline. So I'll let you kind of start with this one, Jerry.
Yeah, look, crazy impact here. Obviously, capturing in flight, you've sort of got that healthy fear on the face, but obviously a bit of it's sort of like healthy fear, but also confidence at the same time. So I love the expression. The movement, I think, is fantastic. I love the cloud that's coming from the top left, leading your eye right into, the movement. I think what brings me back to earth a little bit is, obviously, it's very steep. It's obvious. What brings me back to earth is then seeing the grasses or the weeds or whatever it is on the bottom of the frame. Like, I just cropped it a touch closer, and then, a bit out of that bulk of the grasses, because it brings me back to earth a little bit. Does that make sense? So when you don't know where someone is going, and if you crop that out, you actually think it's crazy steeper than it already is. So I wouldn't do too much different. I think the timing is fantastic. The movement of that one leg and the dust moving, I think, is fantastic. And then you got the serenity of the bushes on the top. But everything is great. I would just crop it a little bit tighter. Or if there's, go into your generative fill and basically say remove the grasses from the bottom and then see what happens. I think you'll find that it would be even more dramatic, because you'll feel like that steepness is, like I said, going on forever.
Yeah, I just cropped it in a little bit for everyone to see, and I 100% agree. It definitely does give it a little bit more mystery, a little bit more of that, holy shit vibe kind of thing.
Yeah.
And this is in my opinion, this would be more of like an editorial portrait, right? Because he's actually in the thick of doing what he does, and that is, well, I don't know, whatever that cowboy stuff is. Radon's from Wyoming, so they're in a whole different world up there where they do things that us city slickers don't really do that much. But honestly, I would say I would be interested to see if there were any other frames that were captured during the set. And the only reason I say that is it's kind of hard to tell, in my opinion. It's kind of hard to tell. How do I put this? How do I say this? The horse just seems very. I'm missing a lot of the horse, right? And I want to see more of the horse, maybe a little bit more opened up or just shot from a different perspective, because even though obviously we can tell that the horse is jumping down this ravine or off this cliff or whatever, I would like to see more of the horse. So maybe even just like the frame that was captured immediately after this, it might give a little bit more insight as to, where the horse starts and ends. So I think that my point that I'm just trying to make is I want to see more horse, of course.
Unless, of course, that horse is a famous Mr. Ed.
That's there you go. That's true.
It's interesting. I mean, would this be more effective from a different angle? I mean, here's the thing. It's very easy for us to say after the fact. Mm-hmm. I quite like it because, as in, I feel like it's the right moment, because it's no different than when you're photographing sports photography. It's let's say a footballer catching a receiver catching a ball, and the ball is in the hands. You sort of like that moment with air between the ball and the person catching it. For me, you're the rider is at one with the horse. If you sort of just go from the top down, it's literally like almost like one body, which any kind of rider is going to want to be at. But you've sort of got the drama of the horse, the movement, and if we went off to a bit to the right, we would have missed those clouds. So you sort of gain points in other ways and less. But I just think it's great. It's a great capture. When I see a moment like this, there's not much to critique. It's just more how more effective can you make it from where you were, and certainly, having 1 foot off or a bit of movement and stuff like that can add to the drama. So yeah, it's very, very cool.
Definitely. Well, hey, Radon, as always, thank you so much for submitting a photo. It's really, she submits stuff like this all the time, and it's just always so neat to kind of get a little bit of a peek in her world, because it's a whole different ball game up there, that's for sure. So we'll go ahead and move on. This one comes from a anonymous photographer. So let me kind of dive into this here a little bit. And I almost kind of want to mirror a little bit what you said earlier on the very first image, Jerry, and that is just to touch up on the pose a little bit. She feels a little like there's too much going on with that right leg, with her kind of grasping that. And obviously when it comes to children, there's not much direction you're giving them, right? Obviously you can give them a little bit, but kids are going to do what they want to do. So the fact that you can get someone this age to actually look at the camera and smile and give you a very genuine emotions, that's a win in itself, right? So again, this is assuming this is a photo shoot for a client. You nailed it. I mean, you have the really nice light, the soft skin tones, the bokeh in the background. You have the blue lavender or whatever. And that's not lavender. That's I think they're snapdragons or something. But really kind of almost creating this vignette on her. I think for me, just the pose feels a little too guarded. But then you could also argue, well, maybe she's just kind of shy, and you're capturing that shyness, that natural emotion out of her. I just think I would like to see something a little bit different, where she's not just so much attention's not going towards her right leg, because again, it's just a little bit too boxy. That would be really my main critique. Other than that, I mean, it's solid. It's good. I would not be this does not suck, is what I'm trying to say. This does not suck, anonymous photographer.
Well, let me give a perspective with children, and for the longest time at the start of my career, I was that photographer that would be with kids, sit down, smile, and make noises, and I'll make them laugh and do whatever. And we often talk, and this is practically the same thing with adults. Let's face it, right? If you're doing traditional portraiture, you'll always get one smiling, looking at the camera. That's like your bread and butter. But with children, I think we pay too much attention on time-less photography. And because kids grow up so quickly and they change so quickly, I'd like your listeners here and watchers to think about timely photography, timely portraits.
Mm-hmm.
This is this girl at this age. So sometimes, like, I'd create this Vanity Fair style family portrait, and this kid is just screaming, and the parents are just wanting to stop screaming. I'm like, no, it's awesome.
Right.
This child is a little asshole right now. Let's celebrate the fact that this kid's a pain in the ass right now. And sometimes you've got this classic, like, everything's just perfect, whatever. And the anomaly is the kid is screaming or doing whatever, or finally calms down and then looks at the camera sheepishly. Ends up being the best photograph. And I think we sometimes strive for perfection too much when I think we've got to give ourselves permission to just let go. With children, let's say in this environment, so we've got a beautiful environment. Obviously, the color palette has been thought of. You've got the purples and the yellow of the dress, and the foliage is great. There's a little, the apple box or whatever it basically is. And I can sit here all day long, say, oh, the pose is this, or we've chopped off the foot with grass. I think with children, the way I like to do it, and I guess encouraging the people watching right now is, and even with adults, think of posing as constructing, and then we deconstruct. In other words, if I had this bride pose perfectly, and her face was this, and her body was that, and her legs were here, and then all of a sudden I made her laugh, or there was something, and then that laugh or the emotion breaks the perfection of that shot. It's the break of the perfection that makes the shot look real. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, if you don't pose them at all, well, you hope that you fluked good light, hope that you fluked somewhat of a decent pose if you're going for flattery, and then you've got nothing. Well, if we start with something that is aesthetically pretty or handsome, or doesn't even have to be that, it's just constructed the way it was purposefully done by the photographer, deconstruct. And now with iFocus, the last several years being popularized, and most of the time, I'll have my camera on a tripod. I'll leave my camera there, and I'll just have a conversation. So, and it could even be just you're just talking, and then you start finding out what the interests of the child. It could be, do you have a pet? And all of a sudden, oh my God, they'll talk about their pet and a dog or a cat or whatever, yes. And then they get relaxed. And although this pose to a photographer who studies photography might not be quote unquote perfect, the mother will look at this, oh my God, she does that all the time. So that's what I'm saying is, if we pose every finger all the time with every single human, then sometimes we're lacking the innate nature of just the way people act, because that's who they are. So let's be, I'm just talking generally in general terms. A teachable moment here is you allow people to, you set the stage with the location, the lighting, the environment. Give them something to do in good light, and sometimes you let go and you don't aim for perfection. You just aim for purpose and who they are at that moment in their lives.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more with that, building that foundation, right? That is something I teach in my workshops is, before you mess with trying to get the perfect photo, right? Get the building blocks in place first, right? Get your lighting right, get them in position, and you don't want them holding that pose forever, right? Because they're going to get bored and they're going to, just it's going to reflect that way on the camera. So one thing I will do is I'll set up my light, I'll roughly position them, I'll pose them, and then once their hand, their foot placement, their body language looks good, I might say something ridiculous. Like one of my biggest things that I say to get people to laugh and kind of break that ice a little bit is I say, assuming I'm shooting like an engagement session, for example, I'll have the guy, hey, whisper into Melissa's ear, what's the sexiest vegetable? What do you think the sexiest vegetable is? And they always laugh, right? They always get this just great response. So I love that advice that you give, Jerry. And again, I couldn't agree more with it. So I'm sure whoever this client was, the parents of this girl were absolutely stoked. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so thank you so much, anonymous photographer, for submitting this. We'll go ahead and move on. This next photo, actually, wait a minute. This is number 7. Wait, what number is this? I lost my place. Hold on a second.
Previous was sixth. The girl with the hat and the floral dress is seven.
Yes. So this is 7. Okay, so this comes from Arlo Williams. So this was an impromptu portrait taken during a Jane Austen day at the Huntington Gardens. Oh, is this the Huntington Gardens in California? I think it is. If it is, I've shot weddings here way back in the day when I lived in California. So I think I think this is the Huntington Gardens in California. If you're watching this, Arlo, I'd love to hear your advice or love to hear your insight on this. But Jerry, why don't you or wait, did I start or did you start last time? Now I lost my place. Now I'm all messed up.
That's okay. No, yeah. I mean, you.
I jumped in last time. So yeah. So it's you. Yeah, you jump in for me if you don't mind.
No, all good. So the styling is really cool. I mean, obviously the hat and the dress is really beautiful, and obviously we have a nice environment here. There's a few distracting elements that sort of come to mind really quickly. The main thing here is that her left hand coming out of her bust is very distracting. It's disproportionate and distracting. And my advice is here: when in doubt, go without. If you think something looks distracting or not great, get rid of it. No one's going to say where that hand is, just by the pure perspective. And the crop is a little bit tight on her right hand. There's something behind her on that bench. I'm not too sure what that is. That little piece sort of coming out of her butt area there. I'm not too sure what that is. And then, of course, the lighting is okay. It's flat, but we're missing a bit of direction, and there's a bit of redness on the face. And then also we've got this strong highlight hitting the actual ground behind her. Now, I get totally, if this was a reenactment of a movie or scene, and as was suggested and everything like that, I get that this might be very quick. I think that if you are doing something quick and don't have time to craft it per se, go simple. Find that little bush at the back there, as you can see. Have a nondescript background, keep it clean, keep it simple, and you're done. Just remember that your eye will usually go to the brightest part of the image. Like I said, that previous shot that we saw with the ballerina and the windows, that didn't bother me. That's just white. In this case, because I can see the context and the environment that you were in, I'd rather the focus be on her and not all those distracting elements, because they're not really supporting the image. And if they're not supporting the image, they're probably taking away. The gesture might be quite nice, maybe if we shot this from our right. Also, what's happening is that it looks like that she probably picked up the dress and was asked to pick it up and then just drop it. Yep. What's happening is that her mid area is just looking bigger, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Like it depends on how you identify what you want to celebrate and everything like that. But it's just unflattering because it makes her look big and bulky in that area. So you're wasting the curve of the bust, you're wasting the waist. And we're not really getting the flow of the dress perhaps from this angle in the way the photographer probably wanted. So when in doubt, keep it simple.
Yeah, I'm going to steal that. You're wasting the waist. I love that. That's something that's a really good perspective. Obviously, everything you said, I would agree on. Just a couple other things I want to address as well. So first of all, when you look at the very left side of the image, you're cropping it just right at her fingertips, and that's kind of a no-no, right? So I would recommend that we bring out that crop a little bit to show off more of that hand, right? Because we don't want to cut off limbs. A couple other distracting elements in the photograph. If you look towards the middle of the frame in the background and the left of the frame in the background, there's a bunch of people there. I'm sure that wasn't your intention to include them, so I would recommend that we just very simply use the remove tool in Photoshop, get rid of those. Other than that, yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna beat a dead horse and repeat the things you said. Everything I agree on, but other than that, along with the pose, I think maybe the facial expression could use a little bit more work as well. She looks a little I don't really know what she's thinking or what's going on, but it's just not the most it's not the most flattering facial expression. And again, it all depends on the intent of the photograph, but I don't think it really necessarily works to this model's benefit. So that would be really the only other thing I would add, Jerry.
Yep, all good.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Arlo. Appreciate it. We have another image, although this comes from an anonymous photographer again. Man, I don't think we've ever had so many anonymous submissions. I think they're just intimidated by you, Jerry. So, but anyway, yeah. So, no information on this image. I'm gonna be honest with you. This is a little out of my depth to critique, and the only reason I say that is because this is just a world that I am not a part of, but I am gonna try to do my best. And really, I think the only thing, let me actually start with the positive. So I absolutely love the lighting. I love how we're using the light to shape, and I'm loving that the key light is really bringing a lot of attention to this model's face, and it's essentially being feathered down. So we're gradually losing detail to kind of add to some more mystery of that image. I think that was brilliant. Couple things I would maybe like to challenge this photographer on, and maybe pick your brain a little bit, Jerry, on, is two things. One, when it comes to the pose, I think I would like to see a little bit more separation between this model's left shoulder and his chin. It's dangerously close, and I would like to see a little bit more separation. And then the other thing comes from a post-production. I find that the gold, especially towards the bottom of the frame, is a little bit brighter than the rest of the subject's body, which to me it almost looks a little too just it doesn't look as natural as I feel like it could be. So if I were to reprocess this image, I'd probably bring down some of the brightness on those gold little flakes or whatever we want to call that. But other than that's really, I can't add too much, Jerry. This is kind of out of my depth a little bit, so I'd love to hear your opinions on this.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think the lighting is actually quite masterfully done. For me, it feels like two edge lights. So you've got one light on either side and behind, and that light that's forming the perimeter around the arm on the right-hand side has become the key light to the face. And arguably, there's probably a very, very, very subtle fill light from the front, just giving us a little bit of a hint of light or residual light that's bouncing off the studio, wherever that is. It's important to note, and I could be wrong here, but I'm pretty sure my interpretation of this is there's an art form where, I think it's a Japanese art form, and I forget the name of it. Maybe you can Google it while I'm talking. There's a Japanese, again, it may not be that culture, but I'm pretty sure it is. It's a Japanese art form that when you break a vase or break something ceramic or whatever and it's cracked, rather than just throw it out, one would get gold and then fill in the cracks with gold. So what we're doing here is
it's called kintsugi. It's a Japanese art form that involves repairing broken pottery by gluing the pieces back together and highlighting the cracks with gold or silver powder.
Yes. So obviously this is a metaphor for this person has gone through a traumatic experience or experiences, probably a series of things, but celebrating the cracks and turning them into gold, because that's, and I often say this, iron is forged by fire. So if you want to teach a man or a woman strength, you don't give them something easy to do. You forge them by fire. So if in this case, we're celebrating the cracks, we're bonding those cracks with gold, and that very soft, delicate hand is basically a celebration of these things. And in that case, as well, let's just face it, Caucasian skin here would nowhere near look as good. The dark skin looks incredible, and the way that the hand is sort of leading your eye in to what's happening in the face is great. I think that the one thing that I would love to have seen here is tilting the head a little bit more so we don't get the nose going into the eye. For me, that's probably the only thing that I would change here.
Okay.
The separation. Does that make sense? Like, if you zoom up to it, you've got that. You don't have that contrast of the eyelash beyond that highlight on the eye. But everything else, and the symbolism, I think, is beautiful. The skin tone, the gold, the edge. it's very, very thoughtfully done. So yeah, I really enjoy this image.
Absolutely. So Jerry, if you had to guess, um, who captured this image, who would you guess? Do you know who may have taken this photo? It's someone you know. I'll put it that way.
Well, I I'll be lying if I tell you that I didn't know. It's more because I have the name on my file and you probably didn't, and I just wanted to protect the anonymity that you claimed. I'm assuming that maybe she didn't want to be spoken of. But yes, I do know who this is, and I photographed her wedding.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. And she did give me permission to share who captured this after you critiqued it. She was hoping maybe you didn't know who shot this, but yes, of course, we all know who we're talking about. This is Amber Henry's beautiful image. Who,
great job, Amber. Yeah, really nice.
Yeah, really, really cool photo. My only negative critique on this, Amber, is that I didn't photograph it. So,
well, can you ask her? Was I right about the Japanese ceramic?
Oh yes, you were. You were.
Oh, there you go. Fantastic. Good.
Yep,
good,
absolutely. Good. Amazing photo, Amber. And actually, Amber is going to be a guest critiquer as well, I think in October. So if you like this photo and you want to get a photo critiqued by Amber, make sure you guys tune in for that. All right, moving on. This next photo comes from photographer Randall Mena, another very talented photographer that regularly submits to our image critique. So, Jerry, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, it's just stunning. It's so simple, so clean. Her expression is just perfect. The styling, between the green background, you've got the prime colors. You've got the blue eyes, the green background, the gold hair, and then you've sort of got the red. It is just beautiful. The only thing that I would say here is that there's just too much negative space on top. What I've done, I don't know if you know how to, if you can interpret the cropping that I'm recommending, but imagine, so crop into the beret, if that is in fact a beret, but let's say crop into it. So if you look at my head here, so let's say if my hair was the beret, crop just halfway, then allow all the negative space beyond her blonde hair, and then give me breathing space just beyond the blonde hair, and then come back and then crop halfway into the green vertically. And you'll see that it's just become so much more powerful, because you're not quite in the third here, you're not quite in the center. There just seems to be something missing because her expression is so beautiful. You straight away it's even more powerful. And
yeah, no, I agree. I think in the blue against that green is just such a nice contrast, and it's a very cool color palette, and I can really appreciate that. One thing that I really like about the icon print competition is that you have creative liberties when you choose your crop. So obviously it has to be on a 16:20, but you have creative liberties on how you want to crop it. And I almost would love to see this as something that would be a little bit unique. So this model, or this girl, she has this very slender profile, and I would almost like to see like a 16:9 crop to help accentuate that that thinness, or that just that length of her body, because her body's so close, and I feel like that would really be something cool. And I would encourage you, Randall, to try that out and just to see what it looks like, because I think that could be really neat. But other than that, there's really not much I can add as far as the post-production or processing or the pose is concerned, because it's all beautifully done. One thing I do want to point out that I think is very important, and I'm actually looking at this photo right now on 3 different monitors, and they all look slightly different. But if you look on the right side of the frame. So if you're looking at those two pieces of hair that are coming out and you look just to the right of it, there's this vertical line, this very, very faint vertical line. And I also see a little bit on the left side of the frame, particularly in the top left. And it looks like a place where maybe the background was like cleaned up a little bit, like there was something there and it just wasn't masked properly. So I would recommend maybe blending that a little bit better. Do you see that as well, Jerry, or are my eyes going crazy?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It could have been something distracting, and maybe there was spot healing, just boom, and you know what I mean. That's what it feels like to me. But it's interesting though. Just on a different note, this is very crudely done. Can you guys see my phone here?
Hold on, let me zoom in on you.
Is that focused now on
It's
my
not
phone?
focused. No.
I don't know if you can.
Oh, wait, hold a little closer. Hold a little closer. I think hold it a little higher. Let's see if it'll at the camera. We'll focus on it. Not really. No, unfortunately.
Okay, it's hard to. Basically, what I did is I cropped horizontal,
Okay.
and
Interesting.
basically, and to be honest, it's even stronger. So what I did is I cropped
Love
into
that.
the beret,
Mhm.
and then I cropped just beyond the crease of where that blanket is, and because really the hero of this is is certainly it's well crafted, the lighting and styling
Yeah.
is beautiful and everything, but her expression is just so innocent and so pure and so delicate.
Right.
It's a lot more powerful, you know.
Yeah.
So,
Yep. Definitely. And Randall, you always have some amazing images, and I love. I love the post production that you do, and I actually need to pick your brain a little bit more on that because this is excellent. So, thank you so much for submitting. We're gonna go ahead and move on. And actually, yeah. So this next photo comes from another regular contributor. This comes from Sandra Meltenberger. This was individually lit subjects, so I'm assuming it's a composite with the Geekoto GT200 flash and a 24-inch mag box. She uplit the ceiling with gels. Okay, so I'm gonna start with this. I have a couple comments. I'm gonna start with one thing that kind of it just bothers me about my own images. It bothers me when I see it happen, and it's something that's so small and easily fixable. But I just want to put it out there because when we're when we're looking at a photo shot at this high of a level, I'm gonna nitpick the small stuff, right? Because obviously, when you're submitting photos like this, you're probably considering it for competition, and that is, if you look at the ceiling, the image is a little off. It's a little it's not level, right? That's a very, very simple fix in Lightroom, Photoshop, whatever. But just kind of adjust that crop a little bit. Um, the other thing I really want to point out here, Sandra, that I think is the weak point of this image, and that is when you're doing group photos like this, and admittedly they can be very hard. Your group photo, your photo is only as strong as the weakest person in that photo. And when I say weak, I mean, paying attention to the pose. So my thing, I think the thing that maybe hurts this image a little bit, and I don't want to take away from how amazing this is because it really is an incredible image, but I think the one thing that's holding this photo back is just the posing on a couple of the bridesmaids, I'm assuming. So particularly, the one in the very front that's closest to the camera. She's very hunched over. She's kind of leaning forward. She looks very uncomfortable, and my eye goes straight to her. And for me, I don't know if there was another frame that you could superimpose of her back onto this image, because it is a composite. But if you have another photo where maybe she's posed a little bit better, I would try to swap it out, because again, when you have that one weak link, it kind of brings down the rest of the image, in my opinion. But other than that, I mean, I think it was a really good idea to light all of them individually, because it does add just a very unique element to the image. But that's all I would really have to say, and that's kind of the one thing that just is like, oh, I wish that was a little bit better because this would be such an amazing photo. What do you think, Jerry?
Well, I mean, high degree of difficulty. I
Yeah.
certainly don't do this kind of stuff on a wedding day. And I'm not saying I just respect those who have the time and the energy and the patience to do it. So from that perspective, and doing the gels and all that kind of stuff, yes, high degree of difficulty. I like the contrast and the ambience and the color tones and all that kind of stuff. It is quite tough when you do this kind of imagery, because there's argument to say that that contrasty lighting suits the drama and the nature of the fact that they're wearing these masks, and it's sort of like an eyes wide shut homage or whatever it may be. So now, is it a bit too contrasty? Arguably, I think yes. Blending in that a little bit, like in using softer light rather than, I mean, I'm assuming we got one light close up to each person, then we smudged it away and then we blended it. Sometimes you can do the same effect, but just use a slightly bigger light source, so you get a little bit. Think of it, I mean, a lot of the Vanity Fair shots that you see Annie Leibovitz do is done exactly like that. It's a massive light source going really close to the subject, and then everyone's photographed separately and usually smudged away, and then it's a glorified composite, but it looks like everyone's close to a window. Am I saying this should be like that? No, I just feel like less contrast might be better. In terms of maybe more effective. In terms of the posing, I agree. When you've got the bridesmaid on the left-hand side, she's sitting very flat butt-cheeked, and then she's got her knees together. It just looks very passive, and then you've got the curves being brought out on everybody else. I find that usually when you're getting a woman sitting, and someone who identifies as a woman and wants to have feminine looking, crossing a leg over is just a very easy, low-hanging fruit that's easy to do. When you look at every single woman on the bottom, like the one on the bottom left, if you've got anyone resting on their left hip, the right leg has to go over. If you look at the black woman on the bottom right, you see how her leg is over, but then I sort of want to lazy Susan her a little bit outwards. So, and that's when I think when I talk about posing, I'll often say, lazy Susan this way, lazy Susan that way. That means keep your pose, just rotate like you're on a turntable.
Real quick, Jerry, is that an Australian thing? Because Ben gave the exact same advice last image critique, and he was the first person first photographer I've ever heard use that analogy. And then now you're saying that again for this image critique. So is that just an Australian thing?
Well, I mean, look, Ben's great in his own right. I mean, he's been to a couple of my workshops, so he may have inherited my Jerryism,
gotcha.
Perhaps. I don't know. I can't claim that, but I've been teaching for a long time, and like I said, he's been to I think 2 of my 5-day workshops, and
nice.
So sometimes, people so yeah, I don't know. But lazy Susan, it's sort of like I always think of analogies that people can understand, whether it's the subject or whether it's another photographer, that it's an easy way to explain it. And I always set the ground rules before I photograph. So I make people mini experts, so I don't have to struggle my way through what I'm photographing. So the posing needs refining of the women on the ground. It's hard to explain without me showing you with another photograph or a mouse or anything like that. But just remember, one leg over the other. The minute you're on one hip, the outer leg will go over the top, and then watch the body weight. Whenever you're resting, because you're leaning backwards, the hand is going to go up, and then the shoulder's going to go up as well. So it's either you support your body weight without that arm and that shoulder and relax it, or you just relax that elbow down and you're resting the body weight on the elbow. So there's a couple of ways of doing it, but again, hard to sort of speak about it without showing you.
Right, absolutely.
But cleverly done. I mean, like I said, masterfully done. I mean, in terms of the balance of the light and all that stuff, I've done things like this, but all together, no, it's
Yeah.
it takes commitment and a lot of courage and a lot of energy and trust that they've built with the bridal party. So it's pretty amazing from that perspective.
Absolutely. I mean, the fact that you're able to pull this off on a wedding day, Sandra, is pretty incredible. So I just want to make sure I give you credit for that, because this is definitely not easy. So good job. Thank you for submitting. And hey, real quick, Jerry, before we jump, we're at the halfway point, and before we jump onto the next image, I kind of wanted to give you 2 minutes really fast to talk about the Omega reflector. Now, at the end of this video, we're going to be giving away one for free to a random person in the group that submitted these images, but I wanted to see if you could just give us a little bit of info on what it is and what it's about.
Yeah, look, I mean, everyone knows what a 5-in-1 reflector is. Everyone probably has one, and it's probably in the trunk of your car, and you probably haven't used it for like 2 years. I think too many of us just bring out the flash every single time when a reflector can do just as good a job and a lot quicker. What's missing, and what I found, I forget when I exactly invented it, but basically, I started experimenting with just cutting a hole in the reflector. And for long story short, I created the world's first 15-in-1 reflector. So imagine a 40-inch reflector, and then you've got 13-inch holes in the reflector. So now you can just the holes in the donut, as I call them, are mini reflectors. So you can use them for detail shots, illuminating the face without the body, independent of anything of the main unit. If you want it as a normal reflector, grab the hole in the donut, shove it on the reflector, and you've got a normal reflector. Now, the secret sauce of the Omega is shoot through it. So all you need is one light source behind the subject. It hits the reflector, goes back on the person, and then the photographer shoots through the hole. And what it does, it gives you the luxury of a beauty dish and the catch lights of a ring light. And it is everyone, I almost every portrait that I do, that one of the first shots that I'll do is with the Omega, because you've got this beautiful backlight, edge light, and then you've got this front flooding light that's so complementary. Everyone freaks out. And for those of you who want to look at it, it's Omega, spelt correctly, Omega, omegareflector.com. And if you simply scroll down, I show you the 15 ways that it can be used.
Yes.
I'm very proud of it. I think it is, I'll make a bold statement. This is the quickest, easiest, most affordable way to get beauty lighting of anything that I've ever used. I'll make that statement. And it's not because I invented it. I just haven't found a better, easier, quicker, more affordable way of getting that look in camera with one light source.
Yeah, and I'll admit to you, Jerry, I'm not really a big user of reflectors, because for the most part I work solo, and a lot of times to have a reflector you need an assistant. But seeing this product honestly is inspiring me a little bit more to shoot more with more reflectors, and I kind of want to pick one up myself, because it really is pretty amazing and so much different and more versatile than any other reflector I've seen on the market. So I'm really, really stoked that you've decided to share one with our group, because it really is a cool product. And just another personal note, I just to support you, I decided to wear one of my Omega watches today as well.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
One of.
Business
must be good, mate.
I do okay. But I am a very big watch enthusiast. So and Omega is actually my favorite watch brand. So there you go. had to show my support. But anyway, we'll go back and jump into the image critiques. But again, thank you so much for your generosity, and we're gonna go ahead and share one with the rest of the class later. So let's go ahead and jump back into this. Where are we at? There we go. Okay, so this next photo comes from photographer Kelly Buchanan. This was shot using a constant light on the left for fill light and a key light with the Geekoto GT200 on her, which I'm assuming was camera right. She didn't specify, but I'm going to assume that is where it is from, just based off of the transition of the highlights to the shadows. So I'll let you start, Jerry, with this guy.
Yeah, it certainly has impact. The color palette is beautiful. It really works well. I love the background that's framing her really nicely, and the fact that we've separated the background from her as well. Um, I, with I've done a lot of maternity in my time. I find that we all tend to gravitate towards very similar poses, like whether it's like this, whether it's like this, or it's like this, or at the bottom. My suggestion is anyone who shoots maternity, take this photograph. Great, you're done. Okay, it's good. It's in the
Mm-hmm.
can. Then say to the mother, say something like this: just with the warmth of your hands, show me how much you love your daughter. What will
That's
happen
good.
is those hands will go from being placed to being very emotive. She'll look down at the belly. That we've humanized the baby. The warmth of the hands just moves around the belly. And if you do this with parents, whether it's hetero couple, two women, two guys, doesn't matter. Whatever. I mean, not two guys, but as in, you know what I mean. Like it could be whatever gender, whatever we're doing. But if there's an expected baby there somewhere, I mean, that kind of warmth of the hands, that's when you take posing to a very different level, and then it works really well. You mentioned so that there's a lot to unpack in that comment, because I'm all about evoking emotion, and those who've
Right.
seen and heard me teach before will know that I've done this in front of a live audience, and people can understand that. But looking at all this, I would also like, you get that little piecey hair on her bust. I would like to get that hair off her bust, or bring or clone that hair so we get that
Mm-hmm.
see-through bit on her bust, full of hair as well. In terms of lighting, it's interesting because someone said I've got a fill light on one side and the main light on the other. I think, and for some reason, people are popularizing that, and that's not hasn't been the way. I don't believe that's an effective way to photograph.
I
As
agree.
in, if you've got a fill light and a main light, the fill light should be front and center or behind you, and or slightly in the direction of where the main light's coming from. Think of it like Ghostbusters. You cross the stream and it's a problem, because what happens is that, like, so let me break it down. This is the easiest way that I can explain whether you're shooting with strobes or even continuous light. But let's even say strobes, because a lot of people are intimidated by strobes. What I do is, if I'm shooting with three lights, so what I'll do is, first I'll start with an exposure of, let's say, 200 speed f8 100 ISO. There's my standard in studio exposure, because I'm not relying on ambience. I first do my fill light, which is the biggest light source I can find. I've got a 7-foot octabox. If you can't find that, get a flash, bounce it off the wall behind you. It doesn't matter whether you're in the way, it'll flood you, and you won't see any evidence of you in the shot. Then what happens is you're taking that shot and that power, that units of power, until you can just see detail. So in essence, it's a bad exposure, but you're just seeing detail with that fill light. Okay, bang, there's your fill light. Then I get the hair and the edge light, and then I've turned everything else off, and I'm just seeing a little glow that I can see detail in. I've taken that shot, now turn that light off. Then I get my main light, and then I get the contrast that I want and the feeling that I want. Then I turn all three on, I take a shot, and boom, I've got the shot that I want. And if I want more contrast, then my fill light will decrease. If I want less contrast, it'll increase. But the problem is that when you run the risk of putting your main light and fill light in completely opposite directions, you've got the potential of having a shadow on the other side of the face,
Mm-hmm.
and almost like, how do I say, like, often we want a light so that it looks natural, so it appears natural. Although this is a fantastical image of that we're setting a stage, and angel wings and things like that. But just remember, those things are quite important to look out for. And I know I'm giving you broad advice, but I'm just seeing it as a teachable moment to discuss it. That's all.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and one thing that one of my really good friends told me early on in my career that I've carried with me as well is, when you're looking at an image, right? I should say, when you're lighting an image, and you're digesting it and you're looking at it, we want it to be as believable as possible. And especially when you're shooting outdoors, you want you don't want to give the impression to the viewer that there's more than one light source, because we want the image to look as normal as possible, as natural as possible. And the phrase that's always stuck with me is there's not two suns, right? So, you light the image like there's one main light source, which, is the sun or whatever the case may be. So that's something that's always really stuck with me. But to kind of go back to this image, Jerry, really the only other thing I would have to add, I mean, you mentioned, you briefly touched up on her pose and her expression. I think, the expression just feels a little bit disconnected. I won't dive into that too much more, but the main thing for me, the issue I think for me is when I think of maternity photos, and obviously this is where I really encourage you to take this comment with a grain of salt, because everyone has their own style. But when I think of maternity photos, and when I feel like a lot of people think of maternity photos, they think of it being a very soft experience, and using hard light like this, I don't necessarily feel like was the right call, because you really do get these distracting, harsh shadows. So I would recommend, using a massive, if you can, the biggest light source you can get away with, just to really help soften those shadows, because I do find that shadow, especially under her chin, under her belly, and being cast from that arch in the background, just a little bit distracting. But other than that, I could talk more about post-production and stuff, but we don't have that much time. But that would be the only thing I would have to add to what you already said, Jerry. But one thing I really appreciate about you, Jerry, is, there's obviously there's obviously things that you can improve on an image. And one thing I really like about you is not only do you say what they can improve on, but you give a really good description as to why, and the reasoning behind why we do these things to our photos to make them better. And that's something that you're very eloquent at talking about, and making people understand why you would do things a certain way. So thank you for that.
No,
really appreciate it. Yeah. Okay. So moving on, this is a photo from Sarah DeChance, and Sarah said on this photo that her friend, a talented dancer, sought something fun and uniquely her own for her maternity photographs. She was enthusiastic about the idea of maternity boudoir and open to exploring various concepts. I had seen a similar pose executed previously, and I believed it would complement her well. I have a black backdrop extended out for her to lay on, and a roll of Mylar underneath from a previous pose. So this was basically an 84-inch softbox was used here. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So let's. Do you want to jump in, Jerry?
Oh no, wait, no. I'll follow your lead. Whatever you want.
Yeah, no worries. I was just gonna say. I mean, really, I think the only comment I would have. Well, I'll let you touch up on the pose. I definitely have some stuff I could address on the pose, but the only thing I would really want to address is just the lighting. For me, it's a little flatter than I would prefer, right? Especially, we were talking about earlier about celebrating curves, and when you're photographing maternity especially, right, it's one of those situations where you really, really want to highlight those curves, and it gets a little bit lost with just the flatness of the light. And I would like to pick your brain a little bit, Jerry, on how you feel like we could improve on that directional lighting. But besides that, I do think the image is just a little underexposed as well. I would like to see see your skin tones brought up some, maybe even a full stop, because it is a little under. But that would be my main critique, is I would like to see the light used in a little bit of a different way to help shape her body. And that could be done in a multiple different ways. I can think of a few ways off the top of my head that I would do to kind of achieve this look, but honestly, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, look, I appreciate that. I feel like whether she's pregnant or not, I think, and I say this respectfully, first of all, it has an impact because of the hair being laid out. Mm-hmm. There's a delicacy to it. But I think that, and again, according to just from what I've seen, what I've done, and how I believe it could be more effective, I feel that pregnant or not pregnant, when you're photographing over someone's head like this, it's just not as flattering as photographing on a slight bit of an angle. And then you might
Hmm.
say, well, why? Well, first of all, from this angle, she'll never have a neck. You'll never see the neck. So now, see what happens is if you focus on a part of the body for a little bit and it starts to look weird after a few seconds, then you know it is. So in other words, if you start staring at her head and then her shoulders, then proportionately, like her head looks small compared to her shoulders. Then, as we go down, the belly's coming out of the bust, but then the legs are coming out of the belly. So now, if, in other words, if we lazy Susan'd her, so her head goes to the right and her legs are going to our left, and then she turned her face left and chin right up, then we start, again, belly or no belly, doesn't matter. Then you start to see a neck. Then you see the curve of the bust, and then you see the softness of where the legs meet the belly. And in this case, she's pregnant. Then you'll basically be able to see shape. So that, I think that's just a common problem that I just see, that when you've got
Hmm.
legs coming out of the bust and then a head coming out of nowhere, it can be a problem. So sometimes the pose might be really good, just your angle is not as effective. So certainly, I think that the photographer's deliberately chosen this sort of darker, moodier feel. I do agree with you, Sean, that if we brighten this up a little bit, I don't really care about the midtones as much, but just the
Hmm.
overall, this just needs about a stop brighter. And then lazy Susan her, turn her face left, chin up, then that would give you more of a direction of light. Then you are shooting more of a shadow side. Then you see the shadow of the belly, the shadow of the bust, and the more highlight shadow we see, you're going to get more of a sense of luxury. And if you're talking about the female form, then every shadow, every highlight makes a massive difference. Even if you're doing boudoir, same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one thing I have never shot is boudoir. That's the one thing I haven't shot. I should do that. I should do that actually. Jerry, do you want to be my model sometime?
You know what, you're a photographer, not a magician, so. you know, but I am Greek and I am hairy, so you
There you
know
go.
if I can trim my body hairs into abs. So if you shoot me from far away, you definitely think I'm ripped.
There
Just
you
don't go
go.
too close.
Right on, right on. Well, hey, Sarah, thank you so much for submitting this photo. It was a really good conversation piece, and honestly, of the amount that I even personally learned from just hearing, our guest host, guest critiquers on this is staggering. So it's really cool to kind of have some photos like this that have the opportunity to present learning opportunities for us. So thank you, Sarah. We're going to go ahead and move on to this next photo. Lucky number 13. This photo comes from David Scott Bowles. And another black and white photo. Jerry, why don't you kick this one off?
Yeah, I do this kind of stuff all the time. I love little slivers of light. I love to play with that. And another invention of mine, the ice light. Having barn doors where you can just get a little sliver, is fantastic. So it's really really fun to use. I would suggest there's a couple of things. That right hand, I don't think it's giving us enough communication for it to warrant being there. So I feel like, and because there's a sliver of light on her eyes, her hand is not giving us much. It's a silhouette, and because we can't
Mm-hmm.
see the gap between the fingers, it almost looks alien-like. So, again, when in doubt, go without. Also, whenever you're photographing someone who's turning their face like this and she's turning her eyes to the right, we're photographing into the sclera, the whites of the
I
eyes,
was just about
and
to ask.
therefore,
Yep.
yeah. So therefore, we don't have the catch lights. As there's a little bit of a dot there, but you want to see more of the pupil and the iris more than the sclera, which is really important. Unless you're trying to look sinister, or unless there's something to that. And then as we're looking at it, the beam of light coming from above sort of frames her, which is cool. But then you
Mm-hmm.
look at her camera left shoulder with that tulle. It is super bright, so we've got to bring that value down. If in fact there's enough detail in that raw file to bring that
Mm-hmm.
down to somewhat, to bring that value. So you're focusing on her eyes. So the styling, the fro is really cool. You've got the embellishment there, the brooches, whatever, being used in a different way. The material or whatever that embellishment on the top is looks a bit distracting, and it again is a very, very bright. So this kind of shot, to be honest, for me, should be close up. I mean, you're really containing the light on her face. So cropping into her hairline, giving breathing space underneath the jaw, maybe some negative space behind her to add to the mystery of what's going on, I think would be even more effective. So the use of light is fun. Just watch those highlights, contain the face, and make sure you're getting contrast with the catch lights on the eyes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And my biggest compliment on this photo, David, was going to be just how you were very intentional with your light placement, whether you used a snoot or like a flag or a barn door or something to really keep that light in a very specific area was a brilliant idea. Honestly, the only critique I was going to say was just, the whites of those eyes. That's something you're going to be very careful on. So whether that's having her look slightly more towards the camera or you repositioning yourself, so you're photographing her, are two things you could have done to try to avoid that. But really, seriously, what a really cool photo. And David's been, especially this past year, I follow his work, and he's been really producing some very creative images. So keep it up, David.
That's awesome. Quick little tip here for your crew. This took me a while to learn, or as simple as it is. When I would get someone to look a certain way, I would just say, "Hey, look out that way. Look out the window. Look at that." And it wasn't specific. So if I'm photographing someone, I would say, "Look at my hand." All right. So now they're looking at my hand. Then what I'm doing is I'm looking at their eyes. I say, "Look at my hand," and I'm moving them, moving. Oh, I love that. Okay, then I look beyond my hand. Could be a top of a tree, could be a building, and I say, okay, look at the top of that building. So now I've maintained where I want that light on the eyes and the catch lights. It's so stupid simple, but hey, look that way, or look at my hand. Stop. Great. Yeah. Look there, and it's just so much easier.
Yeah, absolutely. That was actually a big mistake that I used to make, and I've caught myself really being intentional especially over the past couple of years. But one photo I really like to do is I like to have my couples look off camera. I think it adds kind of a little bit more of a dramatic, mysterious element to the photo. And before I used to just say, hey, look camera right, or look over there, right? And one thing I was noticing is you'd have one couple looking like really far to the right, and the other couple looking just a little far to the right. So their eyes were very clearly looking at different things. So now I'm a lot more intentional, and I say, hey, look at that tree right there, or look at that Ford Escort, or whatever it is. So very great, really good advice, and it's nice to be validated with the things that you're doing that are correct. So thank you for boosting my ego a little bit there. All right, going ahead and moving on. Thank you so much, David. This next photo comes from Mario, and Mario shot this photo with a Z7 II, and the new Nikon Plena 1.8, which actually Nikon is sending me one because I'm to use in the Pro Prints Invitational competition I got invited to compete in next month. So I can't wait to get my hands on one of these too.
Very cool.
But anyway, so let's see. This is number 14, so that means it's my turn to start. So Mario, one thing I want to commend you on is, whether this was intentional or not, I do want to commend you that you match the color. You have that symmetry, right? Or you have that, not that symmetry, I would say, but just that consistency with the color palettes, right? So you have this nice lavender color from this woman's shirt, and then the nice color matching with the flowers in the background. So definitely a good job there. Where I'm getting a little bit lost though with the image is just in the pose, right? So generally speaking, one thing that Amber Henry always says, and I steal this from her all the time, is if it bends, bend it, right? So this pose is very stiff, right? Her arms are locked up. Her legs are locked up. Even if this was just like a casual photo that you captured, you still can give your subject a little bit of direction. Be like, hey, just kind of, bring up that knee a little bit, loosen up a little bit more, open up your body, right? highlight that waist, bring those arms off of that body a little bit. So really, I mean, I don't have too much to comment on the light and everything. It's a little flat, but it's fine. But really, it's just in that pose. Open her up a little bit more. Celebrate the bend, her her natural features, and get that knee bent, get those elbows bent. But you are a lot more eloquent in the way that you describe posing, Jerry. I'm just kind of a buffoon. So why don't you jump in and give a little bit more info to Mario on this?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, look, certainly the color palette I agree with is great. So we picked up on those colors on what she's wearing. Whether that's again respectfully, thoughtfully done, or whether that was just a coincidence, I'm not too sure. But either way, it's good. Whenever you put two body parts together and you don't see a gap, if they slightly overlap, your eye just gets deceived and you think that person is that wide. So in other words, because she's sitting very square and boxy, forget about her legs for the moment, because there's no gap between her arm and her body, then all you see, in other words, if you've got a tape measure and measured the arm to her left bust, then it's that big. And I have no problem with plus size, small size. I couldn't care less. All I know is that if someone sits square and keeps their arms straight and there's no separation, as you suggested in your critique as well, then it could be somewhat problematic. And again, it doesn't mean every woman has to be curvy and sexy, whatever. It's also got to be age appropriate. What is it for? If you photograph a corporate CEO executive, it's going to be different to a bride, and different to a fashion model, and different to a 12-year-old girl. So everyone's going to be a little bit different. All we're going to basically say is this an effective shot or a pose for what it is? For me, she happened to sit down there. It's a nice little background. Perhaps that's just the way that she sat, and she crossed her ankles. I feel like if we want to craft something a little bit more effectively, and basically ask yourself, what are we trying to say? If it's just meant to be a clean portrait of this woman, then arguably, and if you've got that planner, get her way, 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 way away from that background, photograph at that 1.8, have that out of focus, and the direction of light is coming over her right shoulder, and it's hitting her right cheek, or left cheek from a camera perspective.
So she's broad lit.
She's broad lit. And so if she turned her face to the right, her chin would go to the shoulder that's closer to the camera. And if her eyes were back at the camera, it's very feminine. So if you're looking at me, this is the direction of light. Me turning my body this way, my face to the camera, is considered very masculine. I'm not saying that men have to be masculine and women have to be feminine. It depends on how you identify what you want. But if the woman wants to have that feminine touch, she turns her body away from the light, which she's doing, but then she turns her chin to the outer shoulder, then her eyes are back at the camera, and you get that soft feminine look. See, you could clamp that face there and turn, and all of a sudden it looks a bit more masculine. It depends on what you want. So, depending on who you're photographing, if you don't want to go overly curvy, this, that, whatever, just simply a little gesture can make all the difference. Also, if she likes to cross her ankles like that, but that's what she does naturally, well, cross the other ankle. The right over the left is going to soften it, and if she just slightly bent that knee and break the monotony of that straight leg, that would make a big difference. So, think of it like it doesn't always have to be dramatic. It just, is there a way of adding that little bit of finesse without going too far?
Absolutely. Jerry, is it a little weird that I got excited when you turned into the light and I just
it's not weird. A lot of men have told.
Yeah, you want to finish that statement? A lot of men have what?
It's a lot of men have told me that. Don't you worry.
Awesome.
I need you to question your sexuality, is what I'm saying. If I win over you, then at the end of the day, as long as I one person needs to find me attractive. Everyone else doesn't.
Well, mission accomplished, Jerry. Mission accomplished. My pants are slightly tighter now, so thank you for that. But hey, Mario, I really appreciate you submitting this photo. Keep it up and keep shooting with that new Plana lens. That thing is pretty sweet. We're going to go ahead and move on. We got 5 more photos left. This next one comes from Carrie Arno, and This is just kind of a wild guess, but I'm going to assume maybe this was shot in Chicago.
Well, it could be the play anywhere in the world, though. So, Chicago is a play that could be literally anywhere. So, I don't know. I don't know.
Fair enough. What do you think, Jerry?
I'm starting on this one. Okay. Yeah, look, obviously the lighting is really, really cool. I'm assuming the more I'm looking at this, it doesn't appear to be that the lighting that's coming from those lights above her is illuminating her. It feels to me like maybe there was a flash in there, because it looks a little bit more contrasty than what I believe those lights would be producing. Looking at those shadows and everything like that. All that being said, this is a tough one because it looks like, what have we got? A 17 millimeter lens. So what's happening is that sort of distorting a little bit. It's sort of bulging out a little bit, sort of more convex. So it feels a little bit disjointed. I would have loved to have seen maybe this with maybe a 50 mil and further back if that was humanly possible in the environment. Now, let me go a bit closer, but let me just have a look at what's going on with this in terms of posing and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so, it's funny because whenever you're photographing a dancer or a ballerina, what you think is a good pose and what they think is a good pose could be slightly different because they've got different rules. But this is nice because your eyes that are being led in by that hand, you celebrate that, and she's actually doing a good job with the pose there. Obviously, it's a tough one because you've got her perfectly centered, and then you've got that blue sort of framing her. But then as you go closer, it's there's a poster of someone else, doing the jazz hands. Sort of, I don't know who it is, but it's sort of somewhat distracting. So. Do we want to celebrate that? Do we want to take that TV away and just fill it in with a color so that we're framing her?
I would.
This is obviously visually chaotic. It's not really the problem of the photographer in the sense that it's nothing to do with what they did. It's just the nature of it. There's just these crazy lights going on, and obviously the play, going on. The way that you can get somewhat of a landmark like this and show it off without being too obvious is get this way in the background. Have the ballerina maybe in the foreground and have anything that you're photographing in the background. Like when the first time I went to Paris, I had my subject matter really close to the Eiffel Tower. I shot down low, up high, and that was it. And then as I started to photograph it more, and I would basically get the Eiffel Tower way away from the subject. So you suggest it without being too obvious. And again, I'm not saying that that's what you should have done. It's purely just throwing out around ideas to sort of see what works, but and see what sort of sticks in terms of the thought process. But definitely, not so wide. I would have liked to have seen the evidence of that light. And forgive me if I'm wrong. If something doesn't feel right, whether it's a post-production, I'm trying to work out that lighting on her, what that is, whether it's the existing light. So if they're watching online, I'd love to see maybe a comment or two on how that was achieved.
She did. Carrie is watching, and she mentioned that it was captured with a 200-watt flash and a mag sphere. So my guess is it was a composited image. She probably had one photo with the flash in the frame, and then basically did the plate shot and then removed it in post-production. So that would be my guess of what she did.
So a different way of looking at this, because that lighting up above would have been almost perfect because you've got a main light, you've got an edge light, you've got everything. It might have been a different exposure. So this is where you take one shot for all the signage and then you brighten it up for the subject matter, and then you can just you blend it in a sort of afterwards. But for me, it doesn't. It's too contrasty for the softness that light would produce. So when there's an anomaly in there, your brain can't quite reconcile it. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, very cool shot, Carrie. I don't have too much to add other than just to kind of mirror a little bit more of what Jerry said, and that is, I would almost prefer to see her a little bit closer to the camera. Now, it looks like you're maybe in the middle of the street, so that might not have been an option, but really just bringing her forward, bringing a little bit more attention to your subject, I think would really benefit the image as a whole. So that's really all I have to say. But Carrie, thank you so much for submitting that. That is really an amazing shot, and kudos to you for staying up till 1 a.m. to capture this photo. So, good job. Okay, moving on to this next image. This photo comes from Jessica Hosey, and this was shot using a Nikon Z6 II and a 28 millimeter, shot at a shutter speed of 6400, f2.8, ISO 200. So, okay, let me see here. Oh, it is my turn to start. Okay, so Jess, here's kind of my here, let me break this down a little bit for you. So I have nothing against silhouettes. I do a lot of silhouettes myself. I think they're absolutely incredible way to like convey emotion through body language, right? So I'm a big proponent of silhouettes. I'm sure you've seen a lot in my portfolio. The thing about the silhouette in this case is you have your subjects looking towards the frame, towards the camera, I should say, excuse me. And because of that, for that reason alone, I'm a little, as the viewer, I am a little, I don't want to say upset, but a little like disappointed that I can't see any detail on their face in this particular situation, right? As such, I don't think that making the decision to silhouette them in this particular situation was necessarily the right call. Now, one thing I would have done personally, and again, there's a million ways to skin a cat. This is all subjective. Take it with a grain of salt. I would have taken probably about 2 steps to the camera right. I would have had them looking right at each other and framed them in a way so each of them are perfectly centered in this square, and then having them do some sort of dynamic pose that again will convey some sort of emotion through body language. So that's kind of my main critique here, is I don't think that them looking at the camera was the right call. Now, what I would have done a little bit differently if you did want them looking at the camera is I would have introduced some fill light, whether that's a reflector, hopefully the Omega reflector, or some fill flash. I think that would have achieved a little bit more of a well-balanced image between those highlights and the shadows. But I know Jerry's gonna give me some advice that is a lot more eloquent than what I have to say. So I'd love to. Oh no, Jess said that she submitted the wrong photo of this. Jess, do you have the image handy? If you do, send it to me real quick. We can always jump to the next image, and then we can come back to it if possible. But I'm curious to see if she's able to do that.
Let me comment on this one, because I think it's a teachable moment. I agree with what you said. I just want to take it in a different perspective. If you look at the leaves, okay, you can see air between a lot of the leaves. Therefore, you see a silhouette of the shape of the leaves. They're giving you an idea of exactly what a silhouette is. A silhouette is you're seeing shape, you're seeing form. And if you're talking about the body, you want to be able to, for a woman, curves, bust, waist, hips, and then distance between her arms and her body. And if you're talking about a guy, again, the fact that we've opened up his arms there is really cool, but I'm not seeing a silhouette of his face, as in I'm not seeing the shape of his eyes, his eye socket, his nose, his lips, and so on. So remember, if you've got someone far away and or in silhouette, what you're not getting in expression because of exposure, because it should be either pitch black, in this case a silhouette, it's sort of almost there, but it's not quite. What you're not getting in expression, you should be getting in shape. And if you're getting it in shape, that it means there must be some kind of action going on. So the fact that there's a little bit of detail there is I understand the temptation of that, but I would have loved to have seen the exposure go down dramatically so that you are not getting detail. Have them face each other walking, so there's some kind of, again, some gesture that's giving you the emotion where the face is not. And then I would crop just above that. So you see how you got the grass and then you got that next level? I want to crop into the highlight just underneath those shapes so that I'm contained in the shot, and now it's become an architectural image as well as, again, I'm seeing shape and form.
Right. Absolutely. Well, Jess, if you can message me that photo real quick, we can try to revisit it for a brief moment. But just because we are running out of time, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next photo. And again, we'll try to come back to it if we can. So, but thank you, Jess, for submitting. I really appreciate it. Okay, so this next photo comes from, oh, okay, good. They don't want to stay anonymous. From Ray Humenick. And where she lives, there are so many beautiful waterfalls, and when it's nice, I'd love to get out and do sessions with them. In the weeks leading up to this session, it was really dry, so I was worried about the flow. But about 2 days beforehand, the remnants of the Hurricane Debbie passed through, and the flow was perfect. It had just started to rain on and off, so this image almost didn't happen, but there was a break in the rain, so we rushed through one more set, and I am glad that we did. Jerry, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, beautiful environment here. Never underestimate the power of actually having a long exposure with a waterfall. And I know that that's sort of quite cliche, but often we look at landscapes and there's a waterfall, we do long exposure, it looks misty, looks great, but never underestimate doing that with a human involved as well. Although it's out of focus, as in the background, it probably would have even had that more of a dreamy effect. And apologize if I'm actually wrong and you've already done that, but that's another story. Let's look at the pose. Whenever someone's lying down like that, they'll always have a temptation to actually rest their elbow and have their hand towards the camera, even if it was on a normal ground. The problem is, again, we're foreshortening that hand. In other words, we're removing the length of the forearm. So we have that kangaroo effect, that dinosaur effect where you've got that short little forearm. So what would be more effective? Bring that hand into the body a little bit. That would help dramatically. The rolling of the hip and that knee on the front is great. What's happening is that foot being over behind the other one is making it amputated. So bring that foot. I like the knee on the rock is great, but just bring that foot up a little bit so I can actually see the shape of the foot. Whenever you're dealing with nude, semi-nude, or in this case, somewhat of a it's almost transparent, it's almost translucent, it's somewhere in between. You can make a bust look fuller by lifting up arms. So it's actually very clever. Is when you've got a bust that you want to tighten and lift and firm, then a pose with the arm up is great. What's happening though is that the arm that is sort of disappearing into the head. If we just relax that hand and did something like this, like so you're framing the face and it works. And then if you want that light to be more apparent on her face, remember, God created a little bit of a bridge of the nose. And the good thing about that is if we tilt and chin up, then what happens is that the light, which is usually coming from up above, is going to filter through that bridge and then hit that pocket of, like, create that little pocket of light over here. So remember, like this, okay, light will hit in the forehead, cheekbones, and jawline, and subtly. But so now we're not seeing any catch lights. But the minute we do this, the minute we do that, and chin up, we get that light filtering through. But very impactful. Certainly, there's every the model here, I'm sure, would be absolutely thrilled with this. Once we start staring at, and if you can go back there again, just watch those, those 3 or 4 things, and you would make it even more effective than it already is.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of comment on it real briefly, Ray, I love just the tonality of this. The choice to put it in black and white, I think, was a very good call. And the framing, the bokeh, the composition is also so nice. Really, the only thing I would have to add, and you touched up on this a little bit, is just the hand placement, especially her left hand. It almost looks like she's it's amputated a little bit. So I would probably just bring that hand a little bit more so you can see some of that palm, maybe some of those fingers, either bringing it back this way or up on her head a little bit more. So other than that, that's really all I would have to comment on. So thank you so much, Ray. And then really briefly, just kind of going back, I wanted to pull up, Jess sent me the new photo, and I just wanted to pull it up. Now, Jerry, I don't know if you have a way to view this. if I don't know if you're watching the Facebook feed on another monitor or anything, but if you're not, that's okay. I'll just kind of jump in really quick.
Go for it.
And one thing I wanted to say, Jess, is I can certainly appreciate you made the change I suggested where you are a little bit more square on to the wall, so there's a little bit more symmetry there. However, the problem with this photo is, or I don't want to use problem negatively, but I think the thing that you could do a little bit, to add just the overall impact of the image is to have them bring their chins up, right? Because when you are photographing a subject that is silhouetted, as I mentioned before, you can't convey emotion through their facial expressions because they're silhouette. There's no detail in them. So you have to use the body to convey that emotion. So in this case, their chins are down, and because they're silhouetted, they get lost, right? And it doesn't look like they have a neck. So in this case, it doesn't. The neck is completely lost. So I would next time have them bring their chins way up, frame them a little bit more in towards the highlights of these squares, so they're not getting cut off by the in-between areas. You're going to have a much more effective image here. But again, I can't spend too much time on it since we're already over, but I wanted to thank you for resubmitting that image because it's nice to critique the photo that you originally intended on submitting. So really appreciate it. And we're going to go ahead and move on. So, this guy. Oh, man. Do I really have to critique this guy's photo? All right. I guess I will. This photo comes from Scott Tibbles. So Scott's a cool dude. I like him. He was my assistant during ClickCon last summer. But so Scotty boy, as you know, I am a very big proponent of environmental portraiture. I've made my career doing it. So you might be surprised to hear me say this, but I would almost like to see this photo cropped a little bit tighter. When I think there's a little bit too much negative space happening here. Your eye wanders just a tad bit more. So probably what I would do here, buddy, is I would crop it in, kind of like how I have it on the screen right here, right? So you're getting rid of a lot of that negative space on the left, and actually, if I could, I'd crop it a little bit differently, but get a lot of that tree on the left. I don't think it's really adding much to the photo. In my opinion, the two main subjects here are your bride and then your this structure in the background. So that would probably be what I would do. The other thing that's a little distracting for me as well is this little post that's coming out of the bottom of the frame that's blocking the bridge a little bit. I don't know if there was a way to Photoshop that out or to or you could just reshoot it, but that would be my main critique here, buddy, is just that. But I can certainly appreciate you turning her into the light, as Jerry and I discussed the importance of that earlier. And I'm looking right now, I'm trying to see what's on her wrist. I was trying to see if that's a hair tie or if it's an actual, like if it's a tattoo or if it's a bracelet. It's kind of hard to tell because the resolution on this photo is a little low, but if it is a hair tie, that's just something to always tell your clients about. Hey, make sure you take that off. For me, I do find it a little distracting, so I'd probably just Photoshop it out. But Jerry, do you have any words of wisdom for Scott? And please be very harsh on him. He has a massive ego, so he needs it brought down a little bit.
Well, I mean, first of all, this is obviously been crafted. I mean, you can tell, the little pocket of light that the photographer has found is very effective. And usually when we look at this kind of a shot, a lot of the light would fall on the bushes in the foreground, but the brightest part of the image is where it needs to be, which is basically on the bride's face here, which is great. The tighter crop, I would say, yes, slightly. I think that if you're looking at that top right pocket of light with the blue sky and the cloud there, I'd probably slice that in half. Like basically I would crop it at the valley of that open area. And then if you're looking at like horizontally the trees there, I would probably crop it half as well. Because I sort of did it myself here, just sort of crudely, and that was more effective. Whenever you're photographing a bride, what I'd like to basically see here is I generally personally prefer that a bride is never flat-footed. because we just want to create flow. So if all we did was put all her weight on her back hip and her back leg, it creates movement. So we're not so static. Think of it like you're building a palace for a king. It's going to be straight and strong and long and tall. You build a palace for a queen. It's going to be curvy. It's going to round and things like that. So
Right.
I think of these metaphors again, like it's somewhat heroic because we're shooting down low and up high, and that sort of that beautiful gesture, sort of looking up in the distance, is queen-like. So for those reasons is what I'm talking about. If you go a little bit closer to her, as I'm doing, you see these the shadows underneath her eyes. I generally am okay to do that with like a male face or something a bit more dramatic. But a simple way of getting rid of those shadows underneath the eyes, you get away with it because we've got a little hint of light there, is tilt the face a little bit more and then the chin up a little bit more still. Mm-hmm. Those two things, and anyone who's watched me shoot, which I have more probably content online than arguably anyone.
You do, you do have a lot.
Say, tilt, chin up, like tilt the face, chin up, chin up, chin up. It's those things make a massive difference. Now, looking back at it, would someone appreciate this on a wall as a 40x60 or as a panorama in the wedding album? Absolutely. So all these decisions are great. I'm a massive proponent of turning the body away from the light source and the face back in. That I've built a lot of my career photographing women in that kind of a way. But just remember, tilt the face a little bit more, chin up a little bit more. Often I will give people a lesson. I'd say, when I say tilt the top of your head away from the camera, so if you're looking at me, and if I was slightly on a bit of an angle, and if you said, hey, Jerry, tilt the top of your head away from the camera, as in tilt your head towards the wall, it means this. So this and this. In this case,
wait, can you do that? Can you do that one more time? That was I want to. No, I'm serious. I want to bring you up because it was actually a really good. It changed a lot. So just so everyone can see, I want to blow you up on the big screen.
No worries. So let's say the light's coming from her, like from this direction. So let's say this is the bride, and now she's doing this, right? So it's great. It's feminine. Chin to the outer shoulder. Now, if we tilt more and then chin up, and then I look off into the distance, I get catch lights in the eyes and I get more light in my eyes. When I go too far down, I mean, we get away with it. She's far away and it's got that Rembrandt feel. See, Rembrandt lighting, people just think it's short lighting. Rembrandt lighting is when one eye or both eyes are in shadow, typically better on the male face, or a masculine sort of look. Mm-hmm. With this case where it is Rembrandt lighting, we just want to open up that pocket of light. I always liken light to water. Think of light where the light hits, that's the water. Where it doesn't hit, that's the shadow. That's where it's dry. So think of it like you want that water to basically wet the eyes or whatever you want to illuminate. And when you think of light like water, it becomes more tangible, which means you can shape it better rather than light being some airy-fairy thing that just floats around and we just see the result of, but we don't see the tangible nature of how it's traveling.
Awesome. Well, Jerry, that is absolutely phenomenal advice and definitely a great teachable moment for sure. So, Scott, I'm just giving you a hard time. Thank you so much, buddy, for submitting that photo. And then also, Scott, I forgot to mention, Scott did put in the comments that a comment to you, Jerry, I'm still checking my stocks. So I don't know what that means, but I'm assuming it's because he's checking his stocks. All right, moving on. This photo is from Chuck. I can never say his name right. Chuck Savadalis. And one thing I always love about Chuck's photos that he submits, these are all images that he shot on film decades ago. So he actually shot this one in 1991. This guy, his name is Toi Huang. I hope I'm saying that right. He's an artist, and him and his mother fled Vietnam as the city of Saigon fell in 1975. He was 13 at the time. Eventually, he immigrated to the U.S., and he took up painting as a way to express his experiences living through the Vietnam War. In 1994, he received the Society for the Encouragement of Contemporary Art Award. This was shot in his studio in San Jose on a Cinar F 4x5 Ektachrome 100 film. So, Jared, why don't you start?
Yeah, it's interesting. Once you understand the context and the story behind the person, what seems to be a quite simple approach becomes a lot more effective. The way he's gripping onto to the rope there, that's probably off the boat. I'm not too sure. The way he's gripping his bicep all represents strength as well as vulnerability, because obviously what they've gone through was quite terrible and tragic, but obviously there's been triumph from that perspective as well. The fact that you sort of see evidence of that paint and even the camouflage of the shirt, there's a lot of symbolism there that he doesn't want to be seen. At the same time, he wants to express himself with his art. So the remnants of the artwork or the paint coming off the shirt is important. And then you've just got what seems to be a simple gaze into the camera becomes a lot stronger once you know the story behind it. So I think it's just important to talk about context when appropriate. Bit of breathing space on the camera right shoulder and beyond the elbow there would be great. But for what it is, once we know the story, we can actually look at the symbolism and appreciate it a lot better.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chuck just wanted to chime in that this is one of his art pieces that he's posing with, and it's a very large one. This one was actually 8 by 10 feet. So that's clearly an amazing piece of art. Really the only thing, so I would honestly love to see this in black and white. And the reason being is for two reasons. One, I think when you have an image in black and white, you pay a little bit more attention to the emotion behind the image or behind the story. And I think in a situation like this, we really want to lend to that a little bit more. But not only that, I'm seeing a little bit, and again, this was shot in 1991, so it's hard for me to to judge this or to critique this how I would on a modern image. But I think one of the things that kind of maybe bothers me a little bit is just I'm seeing competing color or light temperatures from maybe potentially different light sources. So I really feel like converting that to black and white would take away that distracting element for me personally, and again just lend itself more into the story of the image. So really that would be my only critique, but I think this especially now that I know the story, I think it's a really, really powerful one, and I'm really glad that you shared this, Chuck, because it really is quite spectacular. So awesome. Very well cool. Hey, we're going to go ahead and move on to our final image tonight. That way you and Melissa can get to your dinner. So sorry for keeping you for so long. But this last image was shot by Mark Creary. This was shot with a Nikon Z8. And he is looking to see how this photo reads and any critiques. Well, Mark, I'm going to jump in and start on this last image. And really, honestly, I think that is actually the challenge with this photo is I'm having a hard time reading it, and I'm having a hard time understanding what's going on. And it's, when it comes to a photo, right? Especially a photojournalism style photo, this is something I tell to, my photographers on my team, with my other company, is that the photo should tell the story. It should tell the story, right? Like, it's okay to have questions, but if there's too much confusion behind it and I don't understand what is happening, then in my opinion, it's not as successful of an image as it could be. So obviously, the hands in the foreground, they're holding something, but I don't know what. I don't really understand what's happening here. And on that level, I feel like I don't want to say it fails, but it just doesn't, it doesn't convey the story as well as I think it could. The other problem as well is, from what I can see, the woman in the foreground is the most in focus, and we also see the least amount of her compared to the woman in the background and compared to the hands in the foreground. So on that mark, I feel like the photo needs to be focused a little bit in a different area. So that's kind of my main critique on it. But as far as the tonality, I think the tonality, it's very contrasty, but I personally like contrasty images like that, so I don't really have a problem with it. But the framing is great as well, and I think the crop was a good decision. I'm just kind of getting a little bit lost in what is actually happening here. It doesn't convey the story as well as I would like it to. Jerry, what do you have to add to that?
Well, I think any photographer who photographs weddings, and you were in this situation on the dance floor, I'm assuming, and there was some kind of gesture from a friend doing that, whether it basically, I mean, I'm assuming it's sort of like, maybe it's a gesture where they're saying, hey, kiss, you know what I mean? Like, let's, like emulating, like, this is what I want you to do. And they started sort of laughing. The fact that you've got a shadow of someone holding an iPhone, I'm assuming on the right-hand side on the back or whatever. I mean, this is photojournalistic. So it's very hard to critique. What I'm getting at is, I think both you and me, doesn't matter who it is, if you were photographing a wedding and you were there, I think a lot of us would have photographed this image. I think it's just one of those shots. I don't, without really context, I think this is a kind of shot that you would probably put on the spread of maybe 20 photographs of a reception dance floor spread. Right. So in the context of that spread with a lot of other images, for what it is, I think it's done well. You got great expressions. Absolutely. There's the hands, obviously, because of the reaction of these two ladies, they would know what that meant and it would be meaningful to them, therefore important. So I wouldn't really critique it per se. It is what it is. It's been captured, that fraction of a second with that expression. The hands in the foreground. It is what it is. So again, for me, it's just a part of a greater whole of a storytelling images. I don't think there's really a way of improving it for what it is. It's a kind of thing. Well, let's get the shadow off the back. Let's understand what those hands are. Let's move a bit to the left. I mean, at that point, you're creating photojournalism, which makes it not photojournalism. You know what I mean? Right. So yeah, I just give myself liberty to just, at the end of the day, you fire what moves. Like you photograph what moves. If I'm ever photographing a cultural wedding that I haven't been privy to, I don't understand what the ritual is. If it moves, I photograph it, and yes, and that's it. And you present it. And like I said, these little moments, it could be an in-house joke. It could be something that's personal to them. You just capture it and you provide it to the clients, and they'll add meaning to it that perhaps you didn't.
Right on. Well, Mark, thank you as always for submitting your photos. It was cool to have a discussion about this for sure. So, but that's actually going to bring us to the end of our little adventure for tonight. Jerry, dude, it was okay having you. I mean, it was all right. I could think of better ways to spend my evening. No, I'm just kidding, man. It was seriously, the way you so eloquently, describe, how to improve an image and why is just mind blowing to me. And, I've always been really fascinated with hearing you speak and watching your YouTube videos. I actually reference a lot of your videos to my team of photographers quite often, just saying, hey, like, watch this. It's going to help you. So you're a brilliant educator, and I want to thank you so much for your time, for both you and Melissa's time, for joining us in my education group. It really means a lot that you were here.
No, pleasure, mate. Thanks for the opportunity. And I say to all the photographers that are watching, whether it's like live or in perpetuity, to remember that we're critiquing after the fact, where we're not privy to the circumstance. We're just discussing arguably what could have been approached more effectively under the circumstances of seeing it after the fact. And for anyone who's starting or reinventing or progressing, I've always said that you don't have to be the best. You simply have to be better than last week. So it's really you against you. So take your time. Don't forget that, if you approach a shoot with this much sensitivity, you might rob yourself of the joy of the process. So just know that you can self-help. The idea is that you look at your photographs and ask yourself, what could I have done more thoughtfully? What could I have done more effectively? What could I do that's more flattering or more purposeful or more meaningful, therefore more valuable? And then once that happens, you're communicating more effectively. If you're communicating more effectively, you're more of an artist, because an artist is a form of communication. And the stronger the feeling, the more enduring the memory, the more enduring the memory, the more valuable. So it's this sort of this fun cycle. But remember, be obsessed with the process. Get the goosebumps from the process, not the result. And then your joy will last a lot longer.
That's really phenomenal advice, Jerry. Thank you for sharing that with everyone. And that's, something I need to keep in mind, just kind of need to keep reminding myself. Sometimes we get so fixated or focused on the end result and not the process, right? And, living in the moment and being present and enjoying the art that we create is so valuable and so rewarding. So, Jerry, once again, thank you so much. Before we hop off, I am going to pick a random person to win the Omega Reflector. I have a number generator here pulled up on my screen. We're going to go ahead and generate 1 through 20. Jerry, can I get a drum roll, please?
I actually, can I pick the image? Can I pick?
Actually, yeah, sure.
Am I allowed to do that?
You're allowed to do whatever you want. Yeah. So why don't you pick who the winner is? As long as it's not Amber or Scott. I'm just kidding.
No, it's not. It's not going to be Amber. I want to pick Randall. That image just stuck with me. I love. I mean, look, all the images for what they are really effective, but there's just there's a delicacy to that image that there's just a very beautiful quality. Because I'm looking at it as a group, but my eye is just going to that beautiful little girl and that gorgeous expression, just very delicate. And I would, if that's okay with you.
It is very okay, and I just pulled that photo up on the screen for everyone to see again. Randall, what an incredible photo. Congratulations on winning that Omega Reflector. Jerry, once again, you have been amazing. I hope to see you before WPPI next year, but if not, I will see you there, although it is going to be a short trip for me because I have weddings the day before and the day after WPPI, so I'm just kind of coming in to teach and network, but either way, I'll make sure I say hi to you and Melissa at some point. And as always, photography fam, I want you to stay classy, stay sassy, and be dope nasty. Take it easy, everyone. Have a good one. Good night.
See you guys.